All right, so take it away, Michael and Peter.
Okay, I should be sharing my screen. You've hit the record button, I assume, so we're good there. And you're going to hear some music. So if you got any background noises, please put your devices on mute. And here we go. You can sing along with it. I'm a terrible singer. Pete's no better. So just go with the lyrics there. It changed, of course, from the real song.
Well, where, oh, where can my baby be? The Lord took her away from me. She's gone to heaven, so I got to be good, so I can see my baby when I leave this world. We were out on a date in my daddy's car. We hadn't driven very far. There in the road, straight ahead. The car was stalled, the engine was dead. I couldn't stop, so I swerved to the right. Never forget the sound that night. The crying tires, the busting glass, the painful scream that I heard last. Where, oh, where can my baby be? The Lord took her away from me. She's gone to heaven, so I got to be good, so I can see my baby when I leave this world. Well, when I woke up, the rain was pouring down. There were people standing all around. Something warm running in my eyes, but I found my baby somehow that night. I raised her head and then she smiled and said, "Hold me, darling, for a little while." I held her close, I kissed her our last kiss. I found the love that I knew I would miss. But now she's gone, even though I hold her tight. I lost my love, my life that night. Well, where, oh, where can my baby be? The Lord took her away from me. She's gone to heaven, so I got to be good, so I can see my baby when I leave this world.
All right, all right, all right. So let's start with a song, get us all pepped up. That was from the Cavaliers in 1964, the year my brother was born. And the song is "Oh, Where Can My Baby Be?" Of course, changed it to PMO. And for that as well, it was from an album called Last Kiss that Pearl Jam in 2000 ended up popularizing. So we're going to go over PMO, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. Pete and I are working together from foe to friend, evolving your PMO. And so we're going to go through multiple topics here, and we got a great overall session. We'll try to keep it under 90 minutes total. Our goal is to get away halfway between the 60 and 90 minutes that we have here. And we're going to go first on who are we? So I'm the not so charming guy on the left. Pete's the more charming person on the right here. So both of us have been doing this for at least 25 years. So we've gotten a little bit of experience under our belts and done a little bit of work in practically all industries and practically all roles that are related to Agile these days. And so keep that in mind. We do have Twitter links, LinkedIn links, got our own websites. We'll definitely provide the presentation for everyone to have afterwards, just in case anyone asks about that. And Pete, I'm going to have you give any kind of intro you like for yourself as well, of course, if you like. Pete?
Sure. Not too much to add to that. You know, we've got a lot of overlaps in our sort of experience here. I've been at this for a while. I've got some experience on the entrepreneur side and startups, and got me into product consulting before coming back over to the enterprise. So just been doing a lot of that stuff for a while, and just enjoy going around, meeting new people, and chatting about Agile and all the different things that we can do with it.
All right. Thanks, Pete. So we're going to be sharing some new ideas, new concepts that Pete and I put together. This came from a blend that I was putting for Agile 2020 and got approved. Unfortunately, COVID kind of put that to dust. So you get to see this in this meetup instead. And it's grown a long way from the time that we had it back in July that we were going to present it. So let's move on and get into our first survey question. We're going to use menti.com. And with that, let me go to showing that. There it is. What is your current role? So it's menti.com. For those of you who haven't used it before, hopefully you won't have any problem going to this website. You enter in this 7-digit code here, 9654329. It will allow you to enter in what your current role is. Are you an Agile coach, right? Are you an RT, a Scrum Master, a PMO yourself, product managers, product owners? There we go. We're getting some feedback in there. QA manager.
As a lazy programmer, why don't you drop it in the chat so we can just copy and paste?
And we can do that too. That is a great idea. Let me get the chat up, and here we go. In the chat. But that might not be the, actually that's not gonna work for you because it's menti.com with the code. I'm not in there, I'm doing the results. So
Yeah,
someone else would have to put it in the chat.
Yeah, the only thing we can put in the chat, is, because each URL becomes different, is we can add the, we can at least add the code. So you can just cut and paste that one after you get to menti.com.
And someone else was kind enough to do that, a couple of someone else's. Thank you, Rajiv, for doing that.
Rajiv.
Yep, thank you. All right, good. I think we got a good amount of feedback here. Clearly, Agile Coach is the highest. We've got a good amount of business analysts, Scrum Masters, Program Managers, and then a smattering of a lot of other roles. Continuous Discovery Coach. Looks like there was a letter limit on that one. Product Manager, Scrum Master, Developer. Yes, they do get mixed quite frequently. Enterprise Agile Coach, that's a title that I've been favoring myself lately. And not too many PMOs. I see a PMO member. Interesting. Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next one. So I'm going to get over to here. Here we go. Thanks for the feedback. So I'm going to start with a quote from Edwards Deming. Of course, I like to call him the godfather of lean. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with his work. In God we trust, all else must bring data. Right? So let's look at the data behind project management offices. What's the motivators for PMO? How are they charted? What are their purposes, right? And just like any role, they could have different purposes depending on how the organization, enterprise agency that you have wants to use it. So with that in mind, many of you likely have had sort of negative experiences with a PMO, right? We give PMO a bad name, all right? No, it's not a reference to Bon Jovi song, well, maybe it is. But in any event, there's cute nicknames. I've been hearing since I was part of a PMO back about 20 years ago, was my first time in 2004, so 16 years. I was part of a PMO for a company called SAIC. Many of you probably know them, and did it for British Petroleum. And the nickname was Project Management Overhead, right? The process police, Project Micromanagement Office. I've been called that before. It doesn't feel very good. Bureaucratic overhead, right? Or just another self-righteous, narcissistic approval delay to getting value release, right? Well, let's talk about that. Does a PMO have to always have a bad name? But of course, when the business starts to suffer, what part of the organization is the first one that gets affected? PMO. So let's see what we can do. Well, there is a thing called a dance. Now, I'm getting this from a book called The DNA of Strategy Execution by Jack Dougherty. And it's kind of like VUCA. For your coaches out there, you probably know what VUCA is, right? The volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and ambiguity. And I always had trouble saying that word, by the way. And you notice those words are usually in here anyway, right? You got ambiguous and uncertain. You got complex. The only one we don't have is volatility. But dynamic and changing kind of fits there. And we come up with this dance where you go through it, the dynamic, changing, ambiguous, nonlinear, complex, emergent, unpredictable. And this dance is that We're all having to coordinate and orchestrate together. And we want to make sure that all the kind of music there is allowed in it. If you go to a dance party, first off, you hope that you can get invited to there so you can dance to it. And if you want to play there, is it just one type of music that's played there? No, it would be better if the diversity of music comes to place, whether it's a Bollywood song or K-pop or metal or country and western or opera, or pick your favorite type of music. All of them could have an equal say within the type of music that's played. We want to join that dance too and get good music put together so that the PMO is helping orchestrate that. Okay, so Pete, over to you on the day of a PMO.
All right. So it's very easy to pick on the PMOs, you know, to getting down to like sort of the downside of the PMOs and how that gets in the way of how we're doing agile transformations. You know, and it, you know, grew out of, you know, certain practices that we had, and some come from waterfall. But it also tends to be the place that captures some stuff that still needs to happen, even inside of an agile world. And so that's one of the things that we want to get to and sort of talk about is like, where does the PMO have a place inside of an agile transformation? What are the things that we're doing? What are the things that the PMO does on a daily basis that are good? You know, and some of the things that PMO is doing, you know, reporting and collecting of data. That's very important as we're doing data-driven decision-making for things. You know, they also are working across and trying to create standards throughout a bunch of different groups. You know, and that could be something that we need to do inside of an agile context. But I also want to hear from you all as far as some of the so the drivers or the reasons, or, you know, what role does PMO serve inside of your organization? So as Michael here goes over to the next slide and pulls that up, we got a question here for you of what are the drivers for the PMO? So what does the PMO do in your organization?
Thanks, Steve, for entering that in. This is kind of open-ended, so I expect it'll take a little bit of time to start getting feedback.
All right. Do you have to press S in order for us to see the feedback?
Let me put it in present mode. Here we go. I do not believe so. I'll take rid of the hide image. There we go. You're right.
There you go. Facilitating safe implementations. Yeah, if you're doing safe, of course, you know, you're gonna be familiar with the PMO.
Earned value management system. Oh, an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah.
I used to do
wish it was an
CPI, SPI. Well, yeah. Well, some people it's still new.
You know, and that comes from, and again, you know, it comes from a good place. You know, we talk about an agile value and value delivery and focusing on value. You know, and some of the same concepts are out there. Process, standardization.
I can't change this.
Okay, pulling people out of what they're currently doing to start something else that maybe should be something we want to, you know, discourage.
It's not opinionated at all. No idea. They're
no,
not
no opinions at all.
No, that's not an opinion at all. Google Drive.
Standards, documentation, and KPIs. We get into a place where we start doing, you know, agile APIs and things like that. We can have some central places and coordinate everybody together.
All right.
Alignment, experimentation.
Lots of great answers here, all sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yep, defining and implementing agile processes.
All right, that's Scrum. At least you didn't do Scum. I'm used to seeing Scrum be Scum. According to the rules, yeah, follow the rules of the PMO. That's right. Are you ready to move on? I think there's less people answering.
Yeah.
What PMO? All right,
let's go for it.
All right, moving on.
All right. So when it comes down to like sort of the day-to-day life of what PMOs are traditionally doing, this is a survey that came from PMSolutions. And so they found that PMOs spend 85% of their time developing, documenting, standardizing, refining, creating those sorts of things. We also have not a lot of time to sort of plan for impact. So that's something we may want to think of boosting up. We know in Agile, if you're doing scaled Agile in particular, but anytime you've got multiple programs that are dependent on each other, you've got impediments. And then impediments need to be raised up and made aware. And maybe that is something that's happening across the organization. And oftentimes there is no way to share that information from one part of the organization to the other. And the PMO becomes a great place to sort of funnel all that stuff through, so that if we solve it in one place, we can then go and see if that's happening and solve it in other places as well, rather than all suffer the same fate because we just happen to be in different parts of the org. So there's PMOs, can't say that all of them do this, but a lot of, some of them are really get integrated with HR and start paying attention to the people side of things. And so that can be a good, useful way to deploy a PMO in an Agile context. And then just like we were talking about in earlier, that there's like WAGIL, there's one of my favorites was Fragile, Federally Regulated Agile. This, the water scrum fall. So there's all of these different ways that we misuse and that we don't apply Agile, or people are like, oh yeah, but I don't need to do it that way because I got a specific process that we're going to do. So we're going to customize it. And so we can quickly get fragmented and people can't even move from one department to the other without being hit with, culture shock. So the PMOs can help with that, and they can help to go through and sort of understand and help us to make sure that our Agiles are in alignment, as it were. All right, so what are some ways that we could sort of get ourselves out of the drudgery? So how can we pull ourselves into a little bit more of an Agile mindset? I've got some thoughts I was going to put here, and as well, I'd love for you to type some stuff up into the chat. I'll have the chat open so we can take a look at some of that stuff. One of the things that we can pull from Agile to bring into a PMO in order to make it more of an Agile PMO is to get them to use the Agile concept of leading by goals. So a lot of what the PMO used to do in sort of the older context is go in and start leading by reports or data and compliance. And it's not the fact that they were enforcing these things necessarily the bad thing, but we found out that trying to force compliance is not a great way to lead an organization. Goal-based leadership is much more effective. So if we bring some of that goal-based leadership into the PMO, we can start to change the nature of the PMO. We can also start to bring in ideas for empowerment and intrinsic motivation. Take a look, if you're part of a PMO, you're part of the central organization, take a look at both where teams affect other teams and where teams don't affect other teams, and give people space for that empowerment in those places where the team is working, and whether they do A or B really only affects the team, maybe just leave that alone, but if what they're doing affects other teams and creates impediments for other teams, then maybe what we want to do is then try to bring in some standardization, or at least some practices, and make sure that we're aware that, hey, team B, you're an impediment to team A. And let's go in and try to solve some ways to tackle some of these things. Because that's one of the real powers of a PMO, is that you are outside of individual teams and you work across all of those teams. And one of the things when we got into Agile and some of the early transformations was we lost sight and we lost connection with those pieces of, or like us working together as a larger piece of things. And then that brought in the need for SAFe and a bunch of other things, and Scrum at scale and less, and all these other ways to sort of get the teams to be able to work together. All right, let's see, look at some of the comments up here. Focusing on results needed at the project and program level and giving measures of success. Yep. If we do cross-team and cross-program, like burn-up charts and cumulative flow diagrams, PMO is a great group to be able to run those types of things. And if you got good experienced people up there in the PMO, they can guide both delivery and discovery. Yep, both our development process and our design process. All right, and I see that was a question also from 4. Dual track PMO.
Yeah, I've seen it happen before. It's rare. It's a rare breed of purple zebra, but it's possible. Anyway, should we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. So PMO mindset, it's what are the goals? How do we align our goals together? So I saw some responses to the question that was asked about the drudgery, about getting program level supported by a vital few measures of success. That's a great point there. PMO guiding both delivery, guiding, right? Guiding hand, not the enforcing hand. That's a great insight as well. And IT manage and pro services, PMO manage everything from end to end. That's kind of the PMO that we all learn to usually not be very happy with. So there's changes there, right? And so I've been a member of PMO for many years, as I mentioned, like 16. And the last one I was at for about 4 years was for a consulting firm. Now, it's a little different in a consulting firm than it is when you're in the business, right? If you're working in an energy business or an agency in DC and you're a PMO, there's different motivators. For me, the motivator was there that it was based on a consulting organization and money, revenue, and what we called to be, hitting our targets and our gross margins was extremely important to our leaderships. A mid-sized company, about 550 to 700 people, depending on what year we're talking about. And in general, my key one metric that I was measured by as a PMO, which helped me be very autonomous and give mastery and purpose to those around me, was decrease what we call givebacks. Givebacks is when you have money or free consulting services given to a client when you don't want to. We have intentional givebacks, which we call, investments into, hey, we got a big deal with some major consulting firm or a major financial institution, and so we want to put a little extra money in there to win a bigger deal because we're going to show off more and get our best people in it. But givebacks are when we say, oops, we screwed up, here's some money for it, or oops, somebody's leaving the company, we're going to train a new person to come in, we'll pay for that. So it was real easy for me to measure my success, and then motivated me the right ways to help make the workforce that we had in consulting be more agile. And they eventually adopted SAFe, for better or worse, as their main framework they use for delivery as a starting point going forward. So let's talk about how can we align our goals together. So PMOs get a lot of labels out there, and there's 5 kinds now. There's a blend of all types in between. These aren't the end all be all of the 5 kinds, okay? It's not the Bible of labeling PMOs. There'll probably be another 3 of them before I know it in the end of the year or by next year sometime. But in general, a lot of them fall underneath these classifications right now that you have. 1, traditional PMO, right? They're the standard waterfall, what I did 15, 16 years ago at British Petroleum, and now BP has become a lot more agile based and SESC has become more agile based. But this is the starting point. They start doing the checkbox agile, right? And they're the beginning point. Then you have what's called an agile PMO. Whether they really are or not is a totally different question, but at least they are following to some degree the heart of the Agile Manifesto, the 12 principles of agile software development, and start thinking about teams in self-organizing and servant leadership ways. Then there's the product management office. Now this is providing agile and lean, but it's focusing on flow and bottlenecks and product and long-lived teams that will move from, rather than funding projects, you're funding people, right? Bring the work to the people, and you're having sustainable backlogs, and you prove using lean concepts the overall acceleration of delivery through DevOps, through other means, through process improvements, finding out where you have your weaknesses. SAFe has a variation of that they've kind of made their own blend, which is they're called underneath the lean portfolio management. It doesn't really have a name for itself, but what they do under their lean portfolio management is they'll have an agile PMO a LACE, which is a Lean Agile Center of Excellence, and they will visualize the value streams, have guardrails, participatory budgeting, and other more advanced concepts in their way of doing it that's become popular these days, as I witnessed in the SAFE Summit that happened last week. And the last one I have on the list, again, these are all blends, Value Management Office. It's focusing on the value. Now, it's addressing bottlenecks as well, measuring and optimizing value. Of course, for a lot of these, all of these are meant to have the customer at the center of it. Some are more focused on the customer and others. Value Management Office is in the perspective of the user. So that is the last one that I've identified. So these are very much hybrids. And let's go through a survey question on that. So I'm going to go back to the survey and go to the next one. And here we go. Somebody could type in that number there. What primary type of PMO do you have within your organization? Which can be none, but out of those, which would you say is the most dominant PMO that you have right now? Thanks for doing that, Steve. And okay. Safe-based, okay. PMO, that's Product Management Office. Traditional, all right, look at that, a four-way split.
And there's a question in the chat as far as, if you have design-centric or customer-centric PMO, what kind of that would be. We kind of see I see some patterns. If you've got some design-heavy kind of resources, they tend to lean towards a product management office and really base it centered around the product and value streams. And if you're looking at some groups that are doing, the safe implementations, they tend to do an agile PMO because that's what's laid out inside of there. Lightspeed has been pioneering this value management office concept. And it's similar but very different, and it pairs together a couple of those things. So the value management office takes care of the rollout of Agile and training people, as well as it does a product-based, customer-centered approach to delivering on things.
All right, very good. Thank you, Pete. And we're at 18 votes in. That's not a big selection of everyone online, but it gives an idea of the percentage. It is pretty revealing in that about 40% is traditional. I would expect for the Agile coach community in the DC area, that would be the way I would expect it's traditionally dominant. And then you've got the rest at 22 for Agile, 17 for Product Management Office. That actually surprises me. It's more than I thought it would be. 17% for Safe, okay, and then 6% have freedom from PMOs completely. Wow, oh, what a feeling. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you for the feedback. And we'll move on to, does it really matter? Okay, what kind of blended PMO do you have? Now, this is kind of a stage question, right? It's one of those like, what do you mean, does it really matter, right? Well, let's get down to the brass tacks of what PMOs are about, right? I'm going to reframe the idea of what we have with classifying PMOs. And let's instead consider a PMO mindset, right? Mindset's very popular now, maybe a little too popular. It's gotten very fashionable these days. But I'm going to try to distill it down to say that Pete and I have looked at it and say there's four main aspects of evolving your PMO, right? A PMO, like everything else in Agile, is a journey. There's never an end, right? Ask anybody in the FANG stocks if they're done with improving their products, and any one of them would tell you that they're not done. FANG, by the way, is like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and you can throw in Microsoft if you want to as well. And so the four aspects, as anyone can read, efficiency, right? You want to get more for less. Effectiveness, focus on value, right? That we're making something that actually is going to be valuable to whoever's going to use it, where experience comes in. Customer satisfaction, are we building something that's going to be better for the user so they'll switch to the new thing that you're building versus the old thing, right? Customer satisfaction, even customer delight, right? And so the last one is systems thinking. Rather than getting caught in your silos of thinking and everybody gets caught in it, have a way to get enough communication around so that you can look at it from a full system. And PMOs are in a unique spot where they really can be a catalyst to allow for full systems thinking. Now, when it comes to value, I always like to do a quote from Simon Sinek. The value is a feeling, not a calculation. We got to figure out the why here, which is what Simon Sinek's famous for, start with the why. But we got to also figure out how we're going to do this, and how often gets lost even after you get a why, right? That the rest gets fuzzy if you don't have a why. But even if you have a why, how can you make sure that that why gets met? So we got to get clarity there. And we're going to go into that more in some workshop related stuff that we're going to come into just in a little bit of time here. So before we get into that, one more idea, okay, simplicity, right, consistency. Hey, I don't think anybody would ever say that even in being a PMO, having been there, it's an easy job, all right? It's not an easy job. You get pulled in so many directions. Product managers, anybody that's at a level where you have to report and work with a lot of different types of departments and business units, know what I'm talking about, right? You're going to be answering a lot of chiefs, and you're going to have to be pulled in a lot of different directions to help each of those chiefs meet their goal, but also make sure that everything is all well-rounded. PMOs have that duty, and it's challenging, definitely. And the outcomes, therefore, are really important to the balance between all of those different groups that you're answering to. So gathering the right data here is very important. Now, I was alluded to by one of the people that's in this meetup, mentioning about gathering a couple of metrics that are spot on. That gets to be what we're coming to, right? Let's get to the right data to get the right outcomes. All right, now I'm going to go back to Pete.
All right. So one of the strategies that you can use to help to make your PMOs a little bit more agile aligned, and to help to really leverage the power of the PMO to really bring your agile practice, along, and to do really good things with it, is to set that up as a way of bringing in some of the standard agile practices, being able to set some of the standards of training and how we do this, being able to look across the different teams, and to be able to look at, does everybody get it? Is anybody missing something? Could we share some ideas back and forth? Now, one of the frameworks to start putting together is to help with this is called the AMMI, is the way it's pronounced, the AMMI, Agile Mindset Mapping Index. And so this was kind of a project. So I've been calling it the Library of Agile, because there's so many different ways to do Agile. And, I personally, got tired a little bit of the wars of, oh, that's not Agile, or this is Agile, or that, these battles of the Agiles. And there were commonalities between all those different programs. So I started, collecting and contrasting between these different programs to see, what are the things that sort of tend to hold out across the different programs? What ones correlate to success? So there's a lot of sort of data collection and science behind these things. But go to the next slide, Michael, you'll see that one of the things we found is that they tend to have 4 main categories in Agile. We've got a design practice that happens. We've got planning, we have implementation, then verification. We've got an operations process, and we have people practices. And so almost everything that happens in Agile, and pretty much everything I've found, can fall into one of these 6 buckets. But you'll notice that I didn't do this as roles, because one of the things we're finding with cross-functional teams and cross-functional people, is it's better not to think of this, oh, this is the designer, that's the planner, that's the, that's the HR person, but to think of it as activities that we're doing, and that we're all coming together to help with design, and we're all coming together to help with planning, and we're all coming together to help with operations. If you go to the next one, Michael. So now there's also something else at play here, which is that there are different levels of focus, and people are going to be interacting with different things at different times. So of course there's the teams, and there's a lot of practices that deal with just team-based Agile. And then there are those teams that work together in like a scaled Agile kind of environment, product teams. There are multiple teams that are coordinating together to deliver one product. Then you might have multiple of those product teams working together as part of the same organization, and that organization may exist within its own world context, and have an impact, in multiple different areas throughout the globe. And so those sort of things kind of become cross-referenced a little bit. So if you go to the next slide, Michael, what we started doing with the Library of Agile was start to create sort of a grid to sort of, take a look at these practices and see what applied to where at what level. So which practices applied to design practices at the team level versus design practices that's done between multiple teams. What design practices have to deal with your place in the marketplace as an organization versus which ones really have to do with sort of global impact or other sorts of, the sort of how you fit, what your place in the world, what your impact is, social justice, that kind of things. So there's a wide variety of things, and it gives us a nice framework to kind of look at things. If you hop on to the next one, Michael, we'll see that there is here's an example kind of grid. So here's a couple practices. So if we're looking at product practices, this is again that team of team where you can think train when you're talking about safe. There's a bunch of things that teams do when they design together. There are a bunch of practices that teams do for operations to create some standardization between those teams so that these teams can do shared practices. They can do system demos. They can, you have to have everything in the same repository and running the same automations, if you want to be able to do, integrated, regression tests, et cetera. And so who's the organization that sort of sits across those teams and can help with all that stuff? The PMO is one place that can, that you can put a lot of that knowledge and share a lot of those, as Bob Payne likes to say, better practices. He's been training me to stop saying best practices and then to say that, well, there could be a better practice than what we have and a better practice. We keep looking at that. So if you go to the next slide there, Michael. So the other thing that we were looking at is there's a lot of different practices at a bunch of different levels, but also Agile isn't just for IT and software. So we've got teams that are doing, Agile in HR. We've got Agile marketing. We have Agile for hardware. These all take on a different characteristics, but some of the same principles and practices exist. They just take on a slightly different characteristic on things. And we even have things that are outside of it. I have a theater company that I work with that does Agile and lean startup practices in order to build shows and practice things out, and does a fantastic job at that. So in the next slide, we're going to see some examples. So we use a lot of generic terms in this library of Agile listing here. And this gives you some kind of ideas of mappings. And like I said, there's multiple ways to do it. So for example, small batches is something that we've figured out in Agile works really well. We figured out in Lean. Now, one way to do that is sprints. One way to do that in Kanban is to deal with your work in progress limits. So you may not deal with batches, or you may not have a backlog, but you just deal with how many things are we working on, at any particular time. And if you're not in IT, you may not even have those backlogs to work with, but you may have this concept, we've got requests coming in. We do some work with Agile for CMS. And so that gives like an example of, they have processes in place because they're not building software necessarily. They're building policies, and then they're processing things that are coming in, and everything gets sort of, batched up, and we do the same processes. So like I said, there's multiple different ways that we can to do each of these different Agile practices, and that becomes not the important part. What becomes important is like, what is it that makes the difference between success and failure when it comes to these Agile practices? But let me show you one more slide here, just sort of give you a context here. So this is, if you're into the scaled Agile framework part of stuff. So here's a mapping, a translation map. So you can see, the different practices and the terms as they are applied inside of SAFe, and then all of the practices that are mapped out into the library. And I've usually found in most of those things that when I discover there's a problem with a team that's not quite executing correctly, they're having struggles, they're having problems, can usually pinpoint the area where they are into something in this map. And so this has become sort of a central sort of diagnostic tool for myself as sort of a coach. And it's also, works really well as a self-diagnostic tool. And so that's the thing that we wanted to do as an exercise with you all coming up. And so we've got some tools and some things for you to work at. On the next slide, Michael's going to show you one of those tools and sort of how it looks. And so this is kind of this is a grid where you can go through and you can put in some assessments for the teams and give it some sort of details and see how things are growing and moving along. I'm going to go to the next slide here though and try to get you guys set up to download a copy of this and start working on this yourself. You want to take it from here, Michael?
Sure can, and happy to do so. I've just put into our chat the link to the Google Drive that should be totally accessible to the world as long as you know it. And we've got files that we'd like you to download. So that way you get your own personal copy of an edited version. Now it's the PMO one, so I'm going to show that and we'll be going through the ratings here in just a moment, but let me pull up what that looks like. Okay, let me do boom, boom, boom. Sorry for the delay here. All right, right here. So yours will look something like this, and actually they may be a tilde one that's being opened by me. But the one you want to download is this one right here, the AMMI PMO alignment template. It is basically a filtered or edited version, meaning it's been abridged significantly from the full one, but we have given the full one right here as well for later use. This is the one you want to download. You can download it by, download it right here. So I right-clicked and download it, and then just open it up with, Google Sheets, or if you want to open it up with Microsoft Excel. Either way, I'm going to do I baked the cake thing and just pull it up right here. And it's going to look like this, where you're going to have these numbers here. They've just been put in, but we're going to just do sprint 1 for the answers. We're going to go through, I believe it's nine yeah. Total. And so that's going to be the rest of this meeting, is just going through these one by one, each of us collectively, and then giving our feedback. And as you build this, we do a simple radar chart, right? Everybody who's probably involved with SAFe and so on know about comparative agility or Agility Health, Sally Alata's company. And we do the same sort of thing. SAFe has their own version of this sort of thing as well. We do that kind of alignment, but our questions and our way of looking at it are a little bit differently. Notice here we've got a not applicable, not a priority, but basically we haven't even tried it. That's a 0. If you've started doing it now keep in mind, this is a PMO perspective. So 0 to 25% of the teams are doing it that the PMO gives oversight on. 25 to 50% of the teams are doing that. And so it could be the collective time of all the teams. 50 to 75% of the teams and 75 to 100% of the teams would get the best rating of a 4. Okay, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or just leave it as not applicable. Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that we found was that it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend a lot of time getting down into minutes of like 10% versus 12% or spending the extra time. It's better to just kind of put into these big buckets. And so roughly it's like a quarter of the time, 50% of the time, or, when you're at the PMO, you're looking across your teams. Do we get like 25% of the teams or half of the teams or 3/4 of the majority of the teams? Good enough. We're not looking for precision here. This is more, we call this an alignment thing. This is not quite like the SAFe or the Agility Health Radar is trying to give these data-driven assessments. This is more of an alignment tool to sort of understand where your organization is. Are they aligned with each other, or are they not aligned? Are they aligned with Agile, or are they not aligned? So the big numbers is actually better in these cases, and it makes it faster.
Okay, is anybody having any difficulty, please? Hopefully you can open it. If you don't open it up through Google Sheets, if you don't have Microsoft Excel, that could be a problem. If you can make a copy of it and then open it up with Google Sheets, which hopefully everyone can do. Is anyone having a major challenge with it? Okay, we're going to go through this slide by slide. Recognize that you're going to be putting values into these zeros over here for sprint 1. Considering in a real example, we're really doing this at a real client or your situation, your context, we'd be doing this every sprint, and it'd be done by the teams to self-assess themselves on how it's being done. But because we're just doing it for us in this example here, we're just going to be doing these 2 and these 5 and this one and this one. Those are where you're going to be entering your numbers. So I'm going to switch back. Any other questions? All right,
Well, I think let's get into some of the things, because I do want to capture some things up front. And so these are things that we've discovered in running these kinds of alignments. And frankly, I used to call them assessments, and I've stopped doing that. And I've stopped using them as assessment tools, because assessment tools get used as weapons, and they get used to pit teams against each other. You know, why aren't you more like your brother or your sister? And that doesn't create good agile health. It doesn't create psychological safety. So one of the important things I want to emphasize here is, if you take a look at this, or you try to make use of this, that it works so much better if you work with your teams as sort of a self-reporting kind of way. And that's why we started calling it an alignment spreadsheet. So we want to go through, we're going to show you some details about we picked 9 areas that are most applicable to the PMO. We're going to show you some of the criteria that you can use to sort of figure out points of alignment and where teams are or not aligned with, you know, agile principles on those things. And it's best to work with the teams and have them do some self-assessment and start to make some collections of data for themselves. You know, how do you feel you're doing? And then start to aggregate that stuff together up at the PMO level. And it becomes a better sort of thing. It becomes a way for the teams to show off. You know, they'll start wanting to do these kinds of looks and, you know, in-depth drives on these things. Because if they come back and say, you know, hey, we were a 3 before, and we made some changes to our practices, and now we feel like we're a 5. You know, and now they're coming in and they're showing off what they're doing, and we're getting able to emphasize sort of the positive aspects of things. So one of the best ways that I've had to sort of implement this was to actually establish these practices in a community of practice. So if you're using, you know, any of those sorts of, you know, places where you got all your designers coming together, or you've got all your product people, or your developers are coming together, your scrum masters coming together. And oftentimes I'll pick the scrum masters, and we're often these days, you know, really looking at the scrum masters to kind of be the agile coach at the team level. And so this becomes a great way for the scrum master to have a checklist for themselves. How are my teams doing? Could they get better at certain things? Let's go through and sort of check with that. And so they'll work with the team. They'll talk about what things they want to improve, and how they want to, and what they want to tackle next. And that brings it to this other phrase that we love using, which is called the choose your own agile adventure. Which is another fantastic way to do this. So you go in with each team, and each team, some teams aren't going to have certain problems. So don't make them focus on a thing that's not actually their problem. You know, help each team discover, you know, what is the thing that I need to solve next? What are the things that I know that, you know, is my current challenge? And then go and pull in more information on that, and collect some more ideas and get some improvements on that, or work with a coach or get some training on that, and then boost their numbers up. And then they can celebrate, you know, that they've grown in this different area. But each team is going to want to grow in different things at a different rate. And so the choose your own adventure path, besides being lots of fun for those of us who grew up in the 80s, is, you know, just a way to really give those teams some of that intrinsic motivation. Sometimes people will ask, you know, how can I tap into self-motivation or intrinsic motivation in my teams? And choose your own agile adventure is a fantastic way to do it. And then you can get to a different kind of peer review. So I've done with my teams a peer review where the teams are coming to the community of practice and saying, my team did a great thing this month. They went from, I think, a 3 to a 5 in these different columns. And this is why. This is what we used to do. This is the new training that we did, and we adopted these practices. And here's the new results. And we're having these better outputs. And so they start seeking peer review, and they want to put it in front of other folks. And then other folks can give feedback and say, oh, that sounds great. I noticed that you're not doing this. Have you thought about that? And then they start giving feedback to each other. And so it generates these fantastic conversations. But to do that, you have to get into a sharing mode where everybody's showing your work, so that it's not subjective. It's not, oh, we're definitely a 5 now. Oh, yay, hey, what does a 5 mean? I don't know what that means. You know, but it's, you know, we are, you know, we think that we're doing this, you know, 75% of the time or 100% of the time. And here's why. Let me show you this thing. Let me show you this metric, or let me show you what our user stories look like. And we think our user stories are so much better now because we adopted these techniques. And then their peers get to learn something through that sharing process and the process of sharing your work. All right, so we're going to take you through a few of these things. A quick question, I'll check into that. So one of the reasons that Four asked a question about how well do these things work inside of the remote. We'll give you a link towards the end for the Library of Agile website, libraryofagile.org. And that actually started as a community project when COVID started up, of saying, of all the Agile things that we need to do, now that we're all working remotely, how do we do that? And so if you go up to that website, what you're going to find is you're going to find a links for every single category that's in this this matrix here. You're going to find a links to software that you can use to be able to do each of these different Agile principles online with a remote social distance group. All right, so our next few things here is we want to go through the different topics, and we'll get through as many of them as we can in the time that we've got going here. But we want to go through and sort of give you an idea for the guidance that's built into the library. And again, you can do these in multiple different ways. You'll see also there's a Menti code up there. So after I do sort of descriptions here, Michael's going to switch over to the survey, and feel free to put in your answers while I'm talking. And we want to sort of see, where do you think your groups are? So if you think like 25% of your teams fit these criteria on this screen, go ahead and put in a 1. If you think 50% of your teams fit this criteria, give it a 2, and then 75% for 3, or if everybody's doing it, give it a 4. And then we'll go back and take a look at a graph of that and see how folks are doing across the call here. All right, so team of teams alignment. And so this is in the category, you'll see there's like a P1.1, that's our library catalog code, and that stands for our product practices. So that's our team of teams kind of practices. And the P1 has to do with the design category, because remember there's those 6 categories. And so our first practice inside of product design practices is team of teams alignment, coming together as a team to have a common vision. So a couple of things that, to watch out for when you're looking at alignment is that, first off, our customers don't care what our organizational hierarchy is about. So alignment for here has nothing to do with our organizational alignment. It has to do with alignment around a product line and delivering things to the customer. So to do that, we want to go in and we want to take a look at, what are all of the different parts of the organization that interact with that particular customer segment. So if we pick any kind of customer segment, how is the interactions between those things? Actually, I could use a drink of water, and this is your slide, Michael. Can I hand this over to you to continue going on this?
It's okay. So we're going to get, thanks, Pete. Pete obviously has a lot of enthusiasm, and I do too, passionate about this. And so here's how we're doing it. You go to that, hopefully everyone can see their own spreadsheet. And Pete explained the definition. I think you've had enough time to read it. And you're going to put in, either 1, 0, leave it as 0, 1, or 2. And say, I think it's about, 25 to 50% of the time. So I'm going to do 2. You're going to have a radar chart here. You're going to start seeing it get built up. But then also you would go to that Mentimeter, right? The one that I gave the link to, or the code to, for you to try. You can then go here, and it will start showing up on this. And why does it say voting is closed? I do not know. That could be a problem here. So we might not be able to do it if voting is closed. Maybe, Pete, you can look at that really quickly, and that could be why people are having trouble. Yeah. So that's the idea, though. We might just skip getting feedback on this one for now because we have a closed voting, which is unfortunate, and move on to the next one. So actually, Pete, I can try to look at what's going on with the next one. But why don't we move on?
Real fast, I've got a window up that says, this question is not open for voting. Please wait for the presenter to open it. So who's the presenter?
That would be either me or Pete, where I'm the one who's kind of running it. So Pete, why don't you go over the next one, and I'll start troubleshooting what's going on here in the background.
All right. Okay.
We just got open.
Just got opened?
Yep.
I saw a thing that said press C. So I pressed C. So hopefully that is what made it happen.
Great. So you can give some feedback. I'm getting some feedback. Actually, you know what? Let's go back really quick for anybody who's still interested. Here we go. Present. And hopefully you don't, it's one person, two person. Yep. There we go. Actually getting an even spread here.
Yeah. And so go back and take a look at these things, you know, after we're done and these criteria, you know, oftentimes when we're coaching with folks, when people are like, oh, we did a value stream mapping in the SAFe world. And then we come in and we take a look and they missed a couple things. You know, they did a value stream mapping, but it really was a mapping of their product teams as it currently exists, rather than a mapping of the customer's interactions with those product teams. And so you can use the guidance to help to give you some ideas of, you know, are you doing the team of teams alignment correctly? Did you miss something?
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move back to the presentation, allow us to go to the next one, and I'll check.
Sounds good.
Check that one's working correctly.
All right. So iterative customer delivery, also known as sort of MVPs. You know, this idea of doing multiple deploys to your customer to learn some kind of information to it. There's many different ways to do that. You know, we've got different techniques. We can do canary releases. We can use, you know, iterative releases. We can have beta customers, or if you're in Europe, where they say, I find this kind of fun, they say the beta customers. So there's different ways that we can sort of tackle this. But the whole idea is to release to the customer multiple times to avoid big complex releases. Also, you know, the more chances that we get to iterate to their customer and let the customer see it, because this isn't about internal iterations. There's actually another section in the team practices that talks about internal iterations of design stuff. This is external iterations with customers. Also, you know, customers are unpredictable. So we want to be able to give them multiple design choices maybe, and do, you know, feedback sessions or customer usability testing on a bunch of different things. These are all different ways that we can do this. But the whole point is to get it out in front of your customers, let them see multiple versions of it, and give you some feedback so you can start to learn if you're on track or not. All right, Michael, you want to switch over to the graph and see how the voting's going?
It's bad news. I cannot unlock it. I think you might have the same lock hold on it because voting is closed.
Hang on. If you send me those questions, I'll add it to my Menti and I'll get it up and running here real quick.
I think it's just as simple as Pete hitting C again and opening us up. I can't seem to unlock it.
I'll get it. Give me a few minutes.
All right. Well, why don't you do the next one? All right. I'll get this.
All right. Why don't we move
it's
on to
not-
the next one?
It's not closed, it just hasn't been opened yet.
If you look on the top right, it says present. Will that do it?
I will
Press
try.
C. Press C.
I'm pressing C.
There we go.
Is it
So
open?
present, press C, and it does it. There. Now it should be open.
All right.
Okay. I think I got the formula of success. Thank you for the help. Woo. There we go. I like seeing those bars pop up. Excellent. So we got 3 and 3 for iterative customer delivery. Seven votes. Anyone else? You can always do this on your own time. We just wanted to get a little bit of an idea of the distribution we're seeing with this audience. You get a feel for how the tool
Right.
works too.
Somebody's doing MVP and iterative customer delivery across all of their teams.
Wow.
Pretty impressive.
Nice. Nice.
Does that mean that they only have one team?
It's
That's right,
possible.
the
It is
company of
possible.
10. All right. All right, great. That's a good amount of spread there. Let's move on. I think the next one's mine. They have to do with economic prioritization. Show me the money, as Jerry Maguire once said in an old film.
I think this one's open.
This one, good. You're checking it. It's open. Fantastic. So,
Yeah.
of course, we want to make sure that we're driving prioritization with value and success as far as in the views of the end users. So there are methods, which I know some people have been putting me in chat, like WizGIF. Funny story, I once went up to Don Reinertsen, who is the person that coined the term WSJF, and I said, hey, Don, what do you, so tell me what you think about WizGIF. And he goes, what's WizGIF? Oh, I mean WSJF. And then he knew immediately what I was saying. So keep in mind that sometimes we coin terms and names that even the creators of it don't even know. So there's weighted shortest experiment, doing minimal markable features, being able to do hacks and hackathons and experimenting, finding those things where you get innovation in the time and space. So getting that to understand whether your hypothesis is actually going to bring money, or it looks like the potential to bring some kind of value. It doesn't always have to be money. It could be saving money. It could be speeding up things. It could be anything that's better than the way it is now, because again, value is a feeling. It isn't exactly any sort of measurable thing. You can't measure feelings very well, and you can't measure value very well unless you're specifically putting it towards a particular context. So that's economic prioritization. It would be great to get your feedback, and hopefully someone put the code on, and we'll take a look at the results of that. So I'm going to go back, go to the next one. And yes, we've got answers here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Glad to see it open. Yeah, I find this still to be a big challenge for a lot of organizations out there. Last company I was with, they talk a mean game with doing this, but actually doing it is two different things.
Yep. And I think one of the things that I found behind that is we already have prioritization methods. And so we've got teams that are doing prioritization inside of their own backlogs. But then they're not looking at team against team backlogs. You know, when it comes to LPM or lean portfolio management, you know, if being able to do budgeting, you know, now we have to sort of ask ourselves some slightly different questions. And so that can really help for figuring out, are we working on the right thing? I did this once with the API team, where they were getting multiple API requests from different customers, internal customers within the group. And their goal, you know, they did a WizGIF for all of the requests that they got from the different teams, and it helped to make sure that they're working on the right things at the right time.
Okay, let's move on. Pete, you got the next one too, and I'll put the code on. We'll make sure it works.
All right, I think this one is open as well. So data-driven forecasting. So another thing we can do, and this is in the product space with planning, as this long-term forecasting. So we can do cumulative flow charts. We can do burn-up charts. So we've got, you know, we're looking at some of velocities, but it's maybe not story point velocities, but story count velocities. And how many stories are we getting done? That helps us to give some nice, you know, future looking on things. But the idea is basically that when you're working in a team of teams, and this doesn't apply to normal Agile, but, you know, in a team of teams, we end up creating impediments for each other. So somebody's working on something, there's a dependency, maybe you have like an API team or something like that. You've got other teams that are waiting on your output. And at that point, you need a way to sort of show what's happening so that other people can plan and to see how far off. You know, if we're working with marketing, we're working with sales, we're working with strategy, we're working with your executives, they need to have certain things that they can use to be able to plan out the work that they're doing and try to get ahead of stuff for the tasks that they need to do. So anytime that we're going to create an impediment for other people, we need to create some information at the same time. So you can see in the next section there, total number of tasks. One of the things we find over time is that the size of a task doesn't matter because it all tends to average out in the long run. So when you're looking at these larger, forecasts that go towards number of stories, for example, instead of story points, we want to try to collect that information on a daily basis so we can keep it current. And if we have some kind of automations in there to help to be able to show those things updating on a daily basis, because we're updating our data on a daily basis, then anybody who wants to know what's going on can just go in. They don't have to attend a status meeting. They don't have to ask for a report. Nobody doesn't have to do any extra effort in order to be able to make that information available through those things. All right, and then the priority becomes a big thing when it comes to data-driven forecasting. So knowing that we're working on the right thing, that we're not slowing down the most important thing in favor of something else.
So it looks like we have less maturity on this one as far as the team level adoption from those that are voting. 7 isn't exactly an overwhelming amount of evidence and the variance that could happen here, but that gives a good idea. Oh, and now we're getting a few others, adding a bit more. But clearly the majority of those that are voted are in the lower amount of adoption. I am going to move on since time is ticking and get to long range planning. So this is road mapping, release planning. But let's look at the guidance here, right? When it's an impediment, we need to timeline our work, right? It's not just a full big front requirements document that's done. It's prioritizing the future work, and then being clear with what commitments are there versus what it can change. A commitment becomes a queue when the team commits to it, and shouldn't be a queue for 3 months, 5, 10 months, 6 months, unless there's been some guidelines on that avoids them locking into not being able to change. So that's the thing that you want to avoid, and you include all the relevant BUs. It could include marketing, it include sales, of course, include infrastructure. It can include your system teams, your security, and compliance, etc. And you leave more time. The farther out, the more loose you have it. So it allows long-range plans to be available. Everyone should be able to see it, and you're going to start doing it in percentage of completion. So leadership, those that care about where their money is going, where the company's money or agency's money going, or what the status is, can always look and see the charts are increasing little by little all the time, and get that confidence that it's not just, oh, we're 99% done yesterday and we're 99% done next week and we're 99% done a month from now. It's like, yeah, how long can you tell me that? Predictability is always the name of the game for giving leadership that confidence and trust. So hopefully someone put the link in. Thank you for doing that. Let's go to the list. This one, and we got right here, long range planning. So we had somebody that has pretty much got it down pat for all the teams. Wonderful, wonderful, very mature there. Not mature, very, very aligned, I'll say. More aligned with your long-term, mid-term, and short-term planning. That's great.
Mm-hmm. I saw some comments in there that sometimes it can be hard to pull this out of your teams. And it really, I find that comes down to teams that are focused on just their teams don't understand why we need this data. And that's often where the role of the PMO can come into play. I often have to go to teams and say, hey, I understand this isn't really, you don't see the benefit and the outputs of this, but I can tell you that other people need it. And that's why I'm asking you to produce this. And when they produce stuff that you need, then you'll see the benefit of this.
It looks like we got a quorum of 10. And if this were an actual in-person meeting, we'd talk through with our extra time about why you put it there and give some more of your own context. But of course, we're running a little bit of OT here, so we're going to move on. Pete, up to you next.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just switch this out real quick. And
yeah.
Move that away, and there you are.
All right. So collaborative dependency planning. So in SAFe parlance, we call this PI planning, program increment planning. It's a thing that existed before SAFe. There's a thing called big room planning. There's different ways to do this. You can have program alignment walls. You can have dependency boards. The Gantt chart is actually a way to do this. although there's some problems in sort of how we run Gantt charts that make them less agile. But basically, we're looking at sort of this overall guidance is to find some way to share information back. So again, if you're going to be an impediment to somebody else, make sure that you let them know what's going on. And if you are going to run over, make sure that you let them know that you're going to run over so that they can plan. And the faster you can display that information, the faster you can share it, the more people have time to be able to do something with it.
Okay, got 4 people that have responded. Looking for some more feedback now that you've seen the list, and I'll switch back real quick here. Again, this is collaborative dependency planning, and here we go. Okay, now we got a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty spread out.
Yeah.
So some groups are doing pretty good with managing their dependency planning, others are still early stages.
Yeah. And again, I think I've said it already, but just to sort of re-emphasize, you know, when you've got a small team where you only have 1 or 2 teams, you may not need these practices, you know, but when you do have multiple teams that have to work together, then all of a sudden there's all these practices that you need that you didn't need before.
Mm-hmm. All right, looks like we've gotten to a stable point there. I'm going to move on and get to stakeholder reporting. So stakeholders are very important. Yeah, there was a comment about how we can't expect to be able to satisfy all the different pulls and directions because it turns into Keystone Cops. That's always a funny thing. I imagine Benny Hill for that. Yet we still want to get reporting so that stakeholders know where they are, right? And so it's it involves dependency boards, program alignment walls as a technique show, inspect and adapt, sprint reviews, and showcases. Now, if you read through this, you know, I don't have to read it all out for you, but it's about analyzing the goals with reality, making sure what I call your metrics are cache-based. That's an acronym. Cache means that it's comparable, that you do actions on it if it ends up going one direction or another, that it's simple because anybody can understand the meaning behind it, whether they're technical or they have a certain perspective, which means it doesn't have too many different values to compare with, and it's honest. It promotes the right behaviors. It's hard to get metrics like that, very hard. Metrics can be simple, they can be directional, or they can be impactful. And of course, we want to get the hardest metrics, which is the hardest to create. Not an easy thing to do. So look at this reporting now. We're displaying them. One in a central place, anybody can look at it. Histories and decisions are there as well. So thank you again for Innovation Designer Advisor, I'll call you that, for putting the link on, and we're getting some reports in. I'm going to pull that up right now for everyone to see. Okay, let me put that on present. There we are. So even distribution here, looks like about half the time for some, quarter of the time for a lesser amount. 9 people still isn't that much of a variance. We can't say it's a good you know, research set, but it gives a good idea. Wow, we got 2 that are 75 to 100%. Pretty impressive. Okay, we've been getting to the last one, so I think this is a pretty good amount to go to, and move back to you,
2
Pete.
more. Yeah. So shared better practices, also a great thing a PMO can do. As I was saying, you know, we've got, you know, multiple different places, and the PMO is something that jumps back and forth between multiple different groups. And so if you see a good practice here, you can share it over into another place. You know, it's good to make sure that you can let the best and brightest of your employees participate and share their ideas, so that, you know, you asked about, like, there's like the new names for like the 10x developer, you know, the you know, I want to, there's like a lot of things where like people are like, I want, you know, a class A, like I want my team to be all class A. Well, not all of us can do that. Not all of us can get, you know, those sorts of things. So how could you take and elevate some of that stuff up? And that comes through creating standards. You know, I sort of made my career on being one of those 10x developers. But my career was made because I created reusable libraries that everybody else on my team could use, that employed the power of what I was able to design that anybody could make use of it. They would just add in a library, add in a code, and now they could do the same thing that I had done on the previous project. And sharing that around and making it available to a bunch of different people, you know, it really boosted the productivity of everybody within our organization. So we want to have a thing called the Ratatouille principle. It goes with this as well, named after the Disney or Pixar movie for Ratatouille. There's this speech at the end with the critic who says, you know, he doesn't really understand what the chef was saying, but you know, it's not that everybody can be a cook, but a great cook can come from anywhere, or a great chef can come from anywhere. It's the same idea for our ideas. You know, not every idea in the organization is going to be the best idea, but a great idea can come from anywhere. And so you have to have a process that allows anybody to contribute and share and then give feedback on other people's ideas. All right, shall we take a look at some stats, see where people are? All right, so again, we got a wide spread of usefulness in here. You can take a look at, you know, first place I would recommend is definitely sharing between teams on the same product team, so everybody gets on the same board. But then sharing between even product lines and parts of the organization is going to give you a boost. And then even sharing all of your great ideas outside of your organization into the community is going to give you a great boost, because then you start becoming a part of this larger community. You start contributing ideas, they contribute ideas back, and you can pick up some really fantastic possibilities.
All right, we're hitting the point where I think might turn into a pumpkin or something like that, trying to go a little bit extra days from Halloween here. And we're down to, I believe, is this the last one? I believe this is the last one. Direct customer testing. So get your users involved, right? Amplify feedback loops, right? And have them involved that are the actual users, not a product owner or product manager that was a user, or even is a user necessarily. If they're doing both roles, it can be sometimes they get themselves caught into a myopic way of thinking where they know all the answers. I see this happen all the time because I've been a user for 25 years. I know exactly what the users want, but they might have been a specific kind of user, specific type of persona, but they aren't all personas. So we want to make sure that, yes, we can find majority of bugs and get the TDD and the BDD and the more effective ways to minimize down the zero bugs, but we got to get it to users as soon as possible. Have them evaluate it. Let them talk out loud. Don't interrupt them. Don't anchor them in the direction you think they should go. Don't try to influence their thoughts and like, that's a really good idea. Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I see it. Okay, yeah, that is a great idea. I like using this. When actually you're just saying it, and then they're just mirroring you. They're just repeating what they think you want to hear from them. So it's really good to take a Switzerland, a non-biased viewpoint, and let them just talk out loud, encourage them just to give feedback straight from the top of the head, whatever it is. So they don't know what they want until they see it, and sometimes they don't even know that much, right? So observe and simulate. This is usability testing and design thinking to the max. All right, let's see how we're doing on the results on that one.
And this one's pretty powerful. So I've seen teams that have full DevOps implementations doing, you know, fantastic in their automations and their use of software, have a incremental improvement over what they were doing before. And then teams that just added one usability test that had a multiplier leap in performance. Direct customer testing is a very powerful booster of productivity.
Okay, I think we hit our 10 little Indians again, our brave souls here. And I will mention that Pete and I are writing a book that's related to this and all the other concepts that we're going to be releasing next year. So we're really excited about that. We're pretty far along, but there's a lot more editing to do on that one. Okay, great. So thanks for the feedback. It looks like a good distribution here. And well, we want to see it all, of course, be at the high level, but we're all on our own journeys. And so back to this summary. So let's help PMOs, because we have a PMO's perspective. And we didn't even go on what's a PMO perspective on all these, because there is definitely a perspective. And it will be in the notes within the presentation about a PMO perspective on this. Help the PMO shift from foe to friend. Now that's of course a very tall order. Devil's in the details. And so it certainly, you might be in it with a PMO that's going to be stuck in their ways and they're motivated to stay that way. So it's not going to be easy to do. And it might not even be possible unless some other things change, right? But these and I shouldn't say assessments, but these alignment, all right, indexes help provide and can be done very quickly with teams. It's more the teams pull it, they evaluate themselves, they see where they can improve, and then they pick the ones that they want to do. Scrum Masters help guide it, make sure that it gets baked into your retrospectives. If you're doing safe, you're inspecting and adapts, you get those built up and brought into the whole system. And these are done per sprint basis. And usually you only want to do 1 to 2 per sprint and track that. It could be the same 1 or 2 for the next sprint and the sprint after that. It just depends on how much progress and whether the team finds that still to be the biggest pain that they're dealing with or something else they want to come into instead. And then very important, going back to the metrics, roll up the dashboard for the PMO to review and track. PMO can buy into it, see the progress. And with the PMO and any leadership and stakeholder support on this, as the numbers start coming through and showing progress, of course, those can be the short-term wins that can actually build a lot of momentum and have this grow. All right, we're down to it's almost time to go.
All right.
And I seem to not be able to move the slide. PowerPoint is unstable, isn't that one?
I've never seen PowerPoint become unstable ever.
Never.
Before.
Is that sarcasm? I smell sarcasm.
Well,
All right. Yeah, it decided at least it got through all the slides practically. All right, I'm just gonna.
That's awesome. Well, you did get through all the slides except for maybe the final one where we might have some information on. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. There was a book that was mentioned. What was the name of that book, or do we have a title yet?
We do have a title. It's called Shift from Product to People.
Oh, I love that name.
Let's see if I can fix this on the fly here. All right.
We are, yeah, so one of the things that we run into is the day-to-day, what does it mean to really do an agile transformation, to do one in the product space? And so we ended up writing a novel, kind of like Phoenix Project. But we took sort of the Expanse, Game of Thrones kind of idea. And so the perspective changes every chapter. So each chapter you get to see the transformation from a different person's point of view within the organization. And we really wanted to show some of the things that we found and better practices of, how, you can change your organization to thinking in a customer-centered way versus thinking, going beyond just sort of the agile context, but really get customer-centered.
I think that makes a lot of sense because everybody's perspective is different and their view of the world is their reality. So,
yeah.
So that's a beautiful, beautiful concept. So everybody come off mute for a minute. I know it is 2 minutes to 7 o'clock and Michael did say he would be done by 7 o'clock. But one, I noticed there were quite a few questions here in the chat, which were great. Would anybody like to say any final words? You have but make it quick. Any comments or feedbacks?
Thank you. The book sounds great. We're looking forward to it.
I cannot wait to see the book.
Awesome.
All right, so everybody come off mute and give these guys a round of applause because they were fabulous today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the book for sure. And Pete, is it Pete or Peter?
Pete, it sounds great. I tend to go by Pete, but I find that if I say my name is Pete, people say, what? Pete, okay. What? If I say Peter, they go, oh, okay.
Okay, because it's Pete on LinkedIn and it's Peter here on Zoom, just FYI. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you guys both so much. I thought this was a fabulous presentation. Again, all of the information will be on agiledmb.org quite soon. Pete and Michael, if you guys could send me the PDF of the Menti, I'm happy to post that as well. Thank you guys. You guys were awesome. Really appreciate it. And it was better than I expected, and I had high expectations to begin with. So,
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone, for joining and going through an hour and a half. I don't know if I could have made it through an hour and a half in your shoes, so really appreciate all of you troopers making it through this length. So take care and have a good night. And remember to vote if you haven't already.
that's right. It's the most important thing you can do. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
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 And if anybody wants to follow on anything, you can go to LinkedIn. We got our profiles up there and then the links in the chat. Feel free to follow us. We'll send out details about the book, any other details, etc.
And they do respond quickly. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah, sure.
Take care. Good night. Be safe.